All right, and jumping over and talking about the Los Angeles Chargers versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So we've seen now 2 games with Justin Herbert. Hasn't been able to get his first win yet, but has revitalized this offense. After week 1, everyone was panicking about Austin Ekeler. Keenan Allen looked terrible with Tyrod Taylor there. Tyrod Taylor, gets pulled out right before the game against the Chiefs in week 2 due to a medical mistake that was made by the training staff there. Justin Herbert gets the call, and he looks good against the Chiefs. He played okay against the Panthers last week, threw a pick, and there were quite a few fumbles that weren't his fault that kept the Panthers able to, stay in command of that game. But, they were within striking distance at the very end of that game. So the Chargers have looked good on offense. They did lose Chris Harris Jr. for 6 weeks, so that's another devastating blow to their secondary, which has been one of the strengths of this team. We'll see how that ends up playing into the way that they play. Whereas on the Buccaneers side, we have Chris Godwin is going to be out for this week and possibly a couple more. And a news report that just came up like an hour ago. I don't know the extent of the injury, but it's looking like Leonard Fournette pulled something up over this week where it looks like he may even be out. So, some big named injuries here on the Buccaneers side that will change the way that we attack this offense for fantasy purposes. So in terms of the way that Vegas is slating this game to go, they don't believe in the Chargers at all. They've got the Buccaneers winning this by 7, a little bit lower over-under on the week, 43.5. Chargers have been pretty good at slowing down fantasy opposition. 15th against quarterbacks, 28th against running backs. Very good at slowing down opposing running backs, but Mike Davis did have a good game last week. Good at slowing down the wide receivers and tight ends as well, whereas the Buccaneers have been pretty much the same, kind of flipped it. They have played some very good running backs thus far. They played Christian McCaffrey and Alvin Kamara, so of course we'd expect the running back points that they allow to be up a little bit higher. So I think this is still an anomaly. We saw the Buccaneers defense last year was really good at slowing down the run and not great at slowing down the pass. It's kind of been the reverse this year. We'll see if that trend continues through week 4. But overall, I think this will be a lower scoring game. So we'll have to kind of temper our expectations for there to be massive blow-up games. But there are plenty of solid players here to go after. Of course, we're going to be throwing Austin Ekeler out there after catching 11 passes last week. That was exactly what we wanted to see. Justin Herbert has brought back the screen game and the dump-off, check-down passes that Austin Ekeler needed to have the fantasy value that he was being drafted for. This is what gave him the ability to finish in the top 5 at the running back position last year, was the fact that he was so involved in the passing game. Yes, he's efficient on the ground, but for whatever reason, Anthony Lynn isn't going to give him north of 200 carries. He needed that passing work, and it looks like he's getting it back. So great news for Austin Ekeler. Fire him up every week until he proves otherwise. Keenan Allen looks like he's back into the wide receiver 1 category. Had over 12, I believe 11 or 12 targets last week, but double-digit targets is exactly what you want to see for Keenan Allen. Mike Williams is still dealing with an injury there, may not even suit up this week. So Keenan Allen, of course, you're going to be starting him. And then Hunter Henry, this could be another really good week for him. He's been consistently targeted, just hasn't come through in the red zone department yet for a touchdown. So pretty easy to say we're going to start Ekeler, Allen, and Henry. Josh Kelley is the one that I'm on the fence. So as we mentioned before, the Buccaneers look like they've kind of shifted their philosophy and have been stronger against the pass than they have against the run. But if the Buccaneers are able to get off to a hot start and actually score some points, Josh Kelley is going to get game scripted out. We saw that last week. If we're talking about, okay, what happened to Josh Kelley in week 3? Well, replay back the way week 1 and week 2 went. In week 1 and week 2, the Chargers were in control of the game, or at least within striking distance throughout the entire game. In week 3, they committed multiple turnovers, let the Panthers run the score up on them at the beginning, and they were slowly chipping away, trying to come back towards the end. That is not a game script that is conducive to a guy like Josh Kelley getting involved. He's not nearly as involved in the pass game. That is Ekeler's work. So if the Bucs come out to a hot start, you could see Josh Kelley get relegated out of fantasy relevance again. For that reason, I'm avoiding him this week if I can. He's still a decent option, and I would not drop him by any means because they will have more game scripts where they are able to stay in control. But against a stronger team like the Buccaneers, I don't expect them to be able to, command a lead in this game. So Josh Kelley could end up having a pretty poor fantasy performance again. I guess you could talk me into starting Justin Herbert, but he hasn't shown enough from a fantasy lens to prove to me, and at least in a one quarterback league, that I need to be throwing him out there. There's so many other guys on waivers you can probably pick up this week, namely guys like Ryan Fitzpatrick, that I would not be going out of my way to start Justin Herbert. In a 2-quarterback league, I can see why. Jumping over to the Bucs side. So with Godwin out, we know Evans is going to eat. Yes, this is a stronger team against wide receivers, but Mike Evans has historically done really well whenever Godwin is out. We saw him go off against the Panthers in week 2, who had also been decent against receivers up to this point. And again, with Chris Harris out, Derwin James out for the season, I'm not as afraid of this Chargers secondary to this point. So I think Mike Evans has a pretty good game this week. Now, we mentioned in the little tease to start this that Fournette could be out. It's not determined yet. There's no complete concrete status on that yet. But if Leonard Fournette does not play this game, then I do have confidence in starting Ronald Jones. If that does not happen, if Leonard Fournette is active, you cannot start any running back on this team because it's going to be so game script dependent. Who has the hot hand? Who do they want to put in the right situation? LaShawn McCoy is still getting a lot of passing down targets, so it's been an incredibly frustrating situation because all of these guys could be great fantasy assets if there's some consolidation towards one guy getting the majority of the touches, but that has not been the case thus far. So my plan is, if Fournette is out, I am totally comfortable throwing in Ronald Jones as my RB2. If Fournette is in, I'm not touching this backfield, and I'm waiting it out until there's either an injury, a trade, or something that changes in the way that this backfield is constructed before I trust throwing any of those guys in my lineup. I think the Buccaneers defense is going to be one of the better plays on the week. We saw this team commit multiple turnovers last week, and the Buccaneers were able to stomp out the Broncos last week in a similar fashion. So Buccaneers defense at home, love them a lot this week. Now, Brady had a pretty good game, 3 touchdowns last week. We'll see if he can reprise that here. I don't know that he'll need to do as much this week, and not that he even had to do that much last week. But I think this game will be closer, but also lower scoring. So I don't see the need to throw Brady back into my lineup unless I'm just stuck at the quarterback position. You could talk me into throwing Scott Miller out there in the absence of, Chris Godwin being out. But I would be much more comfortable playing Scott Miller if Justin Watson is out. He's also dealing with a shoulder injury, I believe. It looks like it's mild, so I don't think Watson is going to be missing this game. So I'm probably trying to avoid those options. But if you're in a rut, you absolutely need to play. Scott Miller is an interesting name to throw out there this week. Not playing LaShawn McCoy until he actually shows that he can put up a decent fantasy game. And I'm not going to be touching the tight ends here until they get that situation figured out. Overall, I have the Bucs winning this one. Like I said, it's going to be closer, a lower scoring game, but I got the Bucs winning 21-17 over the Chargers.